Well, just when you thought it was safe to never worry about another Jaws movie, the 3D gimmick came into full swing in the early 80s, and of course, Jaws had to jump on board. And the results are very interesting. Let's review Jaws 3, 3D. Jaws 3D stars Dennis Quaid, Leah Thompson, Louis Gossett Jr., and is directed by Joe Alves. What is up, guys? It has been almost exactly a year since I reviewed Jaws 2, and I've already done Jaws 1 a couple years ago. For some reason, I do these like once a year, and I gotta say, probably about 6 months ago, I couldn't wait to finally get to do Jaws 3, but I wanted to wait until May because May kind of kicks off the summer season. Even though this summer season is different than every other summer season before it, thank you, COVID-19. But Jaws still exists and we can still watch it, right? So, Jaws 3 is a very interesting movie to discuss. Some people think this is probably one of the worst movies of all time. If you look on IMDb, this movie has a 3.7 out of 10. And so we're going to touch on why it has such a rating and if I actually think it deserves such a rating. But there's just a lot of interesting things about this movie, actually. You can almost compare this to Rocky 3. Because if you remember, Rocky 1 and 2 felt like they belonged together. They felt like a natural progression. And then Rocky 3 comes along and feels like a completely different animal. So, no pun intended, but Jaws, is a shark an animal? It doesn't have hair on it. But I digress. But Jaws 1 and 2 felt like the same type of movie, all the way down to like the cinematography. Jaws 3 feels different. But first off, big thank you to Evan Thompson for this freaking awesome t-shirt. Just came in the mail the other day. And I'm just such a big Hulk Bill Bixby fan. And this shirt is just beautiful, just glorious. I don't ever want to take it off if I'm being honest. But anyway, first off, quick plot synopsis for Jaws 3. We'll call it Jaws 3, even though I want to say 3D. This is the actual 3D version, which I was shocked that they released a real 3D version of this. I have the glasses. I've literally watched this in 3D. For this latest viewing, though, I wanted to watch the 2D version. And one thing to mention about the 2D version is the 3D effects stick out like a sore thumb. Like, they don't flow with the movie quite well. You can tell that they had a few gimmick shots along the way, and if you're not watching the movie in 3D, then those shots stick out even more than the actual 3D of the movie. And most of the movie, I would say, isn't gimmicky, like 3D gimmicky. Like I said, there's just a few shots in there. So, to me, if you watch this movie, I think it's best to watch it in 2D. But this one takes place some years after the events of Part 2. I like that the Jaws franchise always focuses on the Brody family. Mike Brody works at SeaWorld. You know, he's the one Brody that doesn't mind the water, whereas Sean is the opposite of that. Sean doesn't like the water whatsoever. And so, both these brothers are grown up now. Dennis Quaid plays Mike. And like I said, he's working at SeaWorld. He's got this girlfriend, Catherine. And somewhere along the way, of course, a big great white shark makes its way into the park, into SeaWorld. Because there was pretty much this like security breach. The security gate got jammed, and it was just big enough for the shark to get in there. And of course, while it was in there, this is a female shark this time. I think it's the only time in the Jaws franchise where we have a female, and the female has a baby. And so Catherine, Mike's girlfriend, she's the one that's kind of like the whale trainer, the dolphin trainer. She really loves the animals. And so when she finds out that there's an actual baby great white, you know, she flips out.
But a live great white. Now you think about that, Calvin. Nightly bulletins on the progress of the killer shark. You
know, she approaches it from an animal lover's perspective, and it's great for SeaWorld. You know, she's a team player. But of course, Mike is like, this is a no-go, you know, based on his past. And so the big fun part, the final act of Jaws 3, I'll go ahead and cut to the chase. It's fun. It's really fun, actually. This is when the shark, the attraction, I guess, gets loose. And there's that really great scene where we realize, and this isn't until really later in the movie, actually, you know, we don't see the full-size shark until like the last act. But there's that great scene where they're like in the restaurant and Catherine, she's talking to Bouchard, played by Louis Gossett Jr., and she tells him the mother is in the park.
Overman was killed inside the park. The baby was caught inside the park. Its mother is inside the park.
And I think that was one of those like pivotal moments in the movie, that like the pivotal line of dialogue, like, we're going to need a bigger boat. Well, the mother is in the park. That is the line that has always stayed with me. I remember watching Jaws 3 back when it first came out, like in the mid-'80s. And if I remembered one line, that was the line. To me, that was like, oh shit. And of course, you have these tourists just walking through, the underground tunnel. And I'll never forget that image. You see the tail, just the fin of the shark just swimming by. The shark in this movie was 35 feet long, bigger than any other shark in the entire franchise. The previous two movies had a 25 foot. This one, 35 feet. And you know what? If you're going to have anything in part 3 of any franchise, and you're not going to be nearly as effective or as good as the first two movies, then why not go big, like literally? And that's what they did. They said, hey, let's just have the shark be a freaking like King Kong giant type of shark. Now, the backstory on this movie is really interesting too. First off, Roy Scheider, hell no. Roy Scheider went out of his way after doing part 2 to say, don't ever, ever, ever ask me again. I will never be in another Jaws movie. He wasn't having it whatsoever. So, at least they still had the Brody family. But, originally, Zanuck and Brown wanted this to be National Lampoon's Jaws 3 People Zero. That was the title. Doesn't it just roll off the tongue? They wanted this movie to be a spoof, where Jaws 1 and Jaws 2 existed inside the movie. It was going to be like a spoof, which would be a huge, huge mistake. They were literally going to have Peter Benchley, the writer of Jaws, be eaten by a shark in his own swimming pool at the beginning of the movie. Can you imagine that? Like, you can't make this stuff up. But they did. And of course, word got out. Steven Spielberg said, if you do that, I will walk from, because he had like some kind of investment in the franchise, even though he didn't direct any of the sequels. He still had a stake in the claim. And he said, if you do that, I'm done. I'm out of here. And so, of course, there was some infighting. And Zanuck and Brown actually quit the studio. They were so butthurt over this whole thing. Like, they literally thought that was going to be a good idea. And where do you go with the franchise after that? If you did go that direction, make this a spoof. Of course, we got Jaws the Revenge anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But at least we have 4 shark movies that are within the same story, that have the same dramatic vibe to them, give or take a little bit. But if you would have jumped out of the second movie and made the third movie a spoof, it would pretty much be the death knell of the franchise. Now, what is it about this movie that people seem to hate so much? Because I watched this last night. I'll admit I haven't watched Jaws 3 that many times, not nearly as much as I've watched 1 and 2. I found myself having a blast with this movie last night for some reason. And maybe that's because I watched it in 2D and said, you know what, I'm going to put aside the gimmick and try to enjoy this movie for what it is. And I went into it with the lowest expectations. And one thing I noticed, I really enjoy the characters in this movie. The script isn't the best, and there's definitely some like cheesy lines along the way. But for the most part, I really enjoyed Mike and Catherine. And then Sean and Kelly, played by Leah Thompson. This was her first role, by the way. And, these 4 characters, this really felt no different than any characters in like an 80s slasher. That's kind of what I equated it to. And usually when I'm watching 80s slashers, I like having nice characters, but I don't like weigh too heavily on them. These characters are not like Jaws 1. But like I said, this one right here, they just felt like fun, likable. That's the key word, likable characters. I actually dug them. Dennis Quaid's really good in this, actually. And I got to give huge kudos to Bess Armstrong. To me, she's kind of the anchor of this movie. And it's surprising that this actress, I know she went on to do like some TV work and whatnot, but I'm surprised that her career didn't go farther after this movie because, like I said, I really enjoyed her in this, actually. She's kind of like the brains of the organization throughout the whole thing. She knows the ins and outs of SeaWorld. And she and Mike, they're the two that really kind of saved the day in the end. Now, Louis Gossett Jr. is always a delight. I've never had a problem with anything he's been in. He kind of steals the show in Officer and a Gentleman, which is a fantastic film. He was pretty much the businessman of this. You know, this park was his baby. And you can see at the beginning when you see like all these skiers. And, you know, he's just a guy walking along proud of his investment. And so he's the one that has kind of an oh shit moment later in the movie when he realizes that the Great White is like actually in the park. But also, Louis Gossett Jr. is one of those character actors that has just a certain flair, a certain style to him that you can't really teach. You know, he just has his own signature to his acting chops, I guess. Now, there's this character Fitzroy, who I'm going to mention because he has a scene in the end which I think is freaking hilarious. But he's a photographer, and he comes on to SeaWorld, and I thought he was going to have more of a sinister role in there. He just has that, I guess, that bad guy look to him. But in the end of the movie, he didn't really amount to much at all. But one reason I wanted to mention him is because the shark literally swallows him whole, which was awesome. You know, he's underwater, and they're trying to like catch the shark, catch a 35-foot freaking great white. And like I said, the shark gobbles him up like a snack. Now, as far as like blood and guts, I think this might be the bloodiest Jaws movie. There is this one character, Shelby, at the beginning of the movie. He's the one that gets eaten by the shark. There's a point in the movie where they have the baby shark, which is a 10-footer, but then all of a sudden they find Shelby, because this was a fucking awesome scene, by the way. You got all these tourists walking through the underground tube, and then all of a sudden you see Shelby's head just like float up. And I gut laughed like you wouldn't believe. So then they get his body, and Catherine can tell that this is not the work of a 10-footer. At this moment, she knew that the mother was actually in the park, but his body, I mean, if you want like good, bloody, you know, carnage candy, this is it. And that's one thing I do love about the Jaws franchise. Even though most of them are PG, they don't hold back when it comes to blood. And of course, the iconic scene at the end. I think if anybody remembers anything from Jaws 3, it's the scene where they're in the control room and you see the shark literally floating towards the control room, and everybody's just like looking, and you see that, especially that look on Dennis Quaid's face when it's coming. The shark literally goes through. I mean, if you're underwater that far, you probably have like, I don't know, 1 foot thick of glass, but the shark just goes right through it, of course. And that scene is just like sheer pandemonium. Everybody's in the control room, and all of a sudden, within like a few seconds, they're all underwater, which is a real oh shit moment. But then Fitzroy comes into play later because he's holding a freaking grenade. You know, he's the guy that just got gobbled up, and of course, they pull the pin on the grenade, shark blows up under the water. But in the end, guys, I had a blast with Jaws 3, and I would say movies like Jurassic Park, even Jurassic World, owe a debt to Jaws 3, because this is one of the first I remember where the attraction gets loose in the park while there are, you know, hundreds if not thousands of tourists around. And that aspect of the movie makes it so fun, actually. So I guess Jaws 3, in the end, it's a bad, good movie. I'm going to give it a super high humdrum, okay? Because I do notice all the faults in it. It does have some cheesy acting. The special effects for its time are still pretty bad because of the 3D effects that they're trying to pull off. But yeah, it's still a lot of fun, and it's definitely one that I'll probably revisit every year. So anyway, guys, in the comments, post your thoughts on Jaws 3. Looking forward to hearing them. Next year, I will be doing Jaws the Revenge. Or if I feel froggy enough, I might do it at the end of the summer. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.